Let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Today on the Prenup podcast with matrimonial lawyer Marcy Katz. Welcome to another episode of the Prenup podcast. Today I have with me matrimonial lawyer Marcy Katz. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So Marcy, tell me where you work.
So I'm at Pryor Cashman. I've been there for a few years. I've been doing family law for 20 years. I moved around a little bit, but now I'm at a mid-size or pretty big firm, which is great. Lots of collaboration, and it's a great place to be.
I love it. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Suffolk County on Long Island.
And then when were you growing up and what were your parents like? What was childhood like?
So my dad was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
My mom worked and then eventually stopped working. I have two siblings. I'm a middle child. And I grew up in a family which was basically like, one of you is going to be a doctor, one of you is going to be a lawyer, and one of you is going to go to Harvard Business School. And it actually happened. So my sister is a doctor.
Okay.
I was, they always say when parents tell you you're going to be a lawyer, it really means they were just fighting with you all of the time, and that was me. And now my brother, he went to Harvard Business School, and that was kind of the system from day one, for better or worse.
So your dad was an entrepreneur. What type of businesses was he?
He owned a sports nutrition company.
Oh, wow.
So he made protein drinks, vitamins. Started from the beginning. We'd go there on weekends and literally fill shampoo bottles with protein drinks.
He was ahead of his times because now everyone has a protein mix company.
Yes. And we just learned really from early days, you weren't going to school, you were working. So it was that kind of family.
Amazing.
It was great.
Honestly, instilled in you probably a core foundation that you have now.
Yes.
So, okay, so older sister doctor, you're a lawyer, brother goes to Harvard Business School. What did your brother end up doing after HBS?
He runs the company there's this big company that owns all of these outlet malls and different properties around the world.
Yeah.
And he works in New York running the company that owns the UBS Arena and the Islanders and the outlet mall in Belmont Park. So he does all their branding, marketing.
That's awesome.
Like that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And are you guys all kind of in the same area still, Long Island, New York?
So yeah, my sister's on Long Island. My brother and I are in the city. He's in Brooklyn, and it's great.
So how old were you when you decided that you wanted to actually go into law? Were you young, or was this kind of an undergrad thing of, oh, it's expected, so I may as well?
So it was kind of a mix. I took, everyone told me I was going to be a lawyer. So I kind of always had it in the back of my mind, but I decided to be a communications major. I wanted to work at a magazine. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to work at George, which is now all the rage because of the show. And then I took the LSAT in college, but I was like, you know what, I'm still going to interview in magazines. I interviewed at Condé Nast, and they told me my starting salary was going to be $30,000 a year. And I wanted to live in New York City too. So I was like, I guess I'm going to law school. It's basically how it happened. So I worked at Sidley Austin for a year. Then I went to law school at night. I stayed at Sidley.
Okay.
I decided that kind of big corporate law world wasn't for me.
Okay.
So I went to work for a small firm with a mentor of mine. And he kind of did a little of everything. Those lawyers who kind of just do everything for different families.
Yeah.
And they help families, they helped my family, and we did one matrimonial case. And in that case, the wife was sleeping with different, cosmetic dentists and plastic surgeons in exchange for services and drugs. It was crazy. And I still remember the facts, right? So I had to go and subpoena all these doctors. Then I had to subpoena all of these pharmacies on the Upper East Side. And I was like, I'm doing this. This is the greatest area of law ever.
You're like, this is real.
This is real. We hired PIs. It was crazy. So that's kind of how I got into it, and the rest is history.
You were representing the husband?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And she just would come home and be transformed?
When I came into the case, they were already separated. So I really... when I got into it, we're at the point where we need to now subpoena all of these doctors to see who was involved in this happening. Because I think at that point, there was no fault divorce. So it was kind of related to that. It was related to how much money she was spending. It was related to, there are a bunch of issues that fortunately.
So you were like, "Wait, this is better than Condé Nast because
Yeah.
the story that I would read in Condé Nast, but
Right.
I'm watching it. I'm part of it
Exactly.
now."
I loved it. And I was just the associate. So like nothing like fell on me. I'm like, oh my God, I love this. I didn't understand kind of the responsibility yet that came
Totally.
with it, but I was hooked.
Okay. So from there, did you continue working for this person and like take on more cases that were matrimonial related? Or did you decide, okay, I need to go to a firm that's like super focused on matrimony?
That's what I did. So New York Magazine would have like the best lawyers, like
Mhm.
issues. I mean, it feels so ancient now. And I wrote a letter to every single one of the matrimonial lawyers on the list.
I love this.
I got one phone call and I like begged for them to hire me and they hired me. So I worked there my third year in law school and then I continued there when I graduated.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a great experience.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about law school, deciding like, okay, this is the path I want to take. Like, and you knew you wanted to stay in New York.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I guess at first, actually, I wanted to leave, and then 9/11 happened, and where most people would be like afraid and want to leave, I was like, I can't leave my family. I'm gonna
Yeah.
stay. So then I went to Fordham. I went at night. I worked during the day, and then I've never left.
So, wow. Okay, so you were in law school for that or right after?
9/11 happened when I was applying to law school.
Got it.
So I started a year later.
Okay. And you were just like, this is, I need to stay home.
Yes.
I get that. Like,
Yeah.
hard to leave your city.
Yes, it's hard. And I've never left.
Okay. So, first few years after law school, getting into kind of the weeds of it, what did you start to see that you were like, oh, these are my verticals or lanes, or this is where I'm really interested in or impactful in the matrimonial sphere? Or was it kind of just all over?
So what the way it used to be is that if you had a court date, you would go at 9 a.m. and just wait for the judge to call you, right? So now you get specific times, you're like 10:40 and you're done at 11. But back then you'd go at 9 in the morning. And oftentimes as the associate, when the lawyer is either talking to the other lawyer on the case or, talking to the judge or just schmoozing because you see everyone you know, my job most of the time was sitting there with the client all day, right? So I just had to talk to these people who are going through the worst things in their lives. And it was my job to kind of make them comfortable. And I loved it, right? I learned so much. We represented people who owned fashion companies, who, would travel all over the world. I mean, these were mostly like high net worth people, who had incredible art collections, which is something I'm really interested in. So
Amazing.
sitting with people all day of all different types who, had incredible stories to tell about their lives and their success. I loved it. And I loved knowing that, like, on every one of our cases, it might be super complex financially, but like you need to learn a different business every time. And I just loved hearing about their lives, hearing about their business, especially coming from an entrepreneurial family, like learning how they did it was
Yeah.
so interesting to me. And I loved that. I also like, people come in and they think, oh, family law, it's therapy. And you are a therapist to some extent, but like understanding the finances and math and tax returns and all of that is like such a big part of it.
Yeah.
And that was a skill I had that I think a lot of people in this field don't necessarily have at the beginning. So feeling kind of self-worth in that area, being able to contribute to the cases in that way felt really good. It just really felt like it fit my personality from the beginning.
Do you think that there's also a part of like, it sounds like you actually really got to know a lot of your clients in a way, like in a more intimate way,
Yeah.
right? Of like actually having these real, like sitting outside of the courtroom.
Yes, exactly. And I loved that. I mean, I loved that like you're in court from day one and you're meeting these people from day one and you are helping them, but they're also helping you figure out who you are and get better at
Yeah.
this job and, understanding what these people and, have in their lives and how their lives run and what's important to them. And, it's a lot of things. When I was 25 years old,
Yep.
I wasn't familiar with, especially, right? Like I grew up in Suffolk County. Like
Yep.
I didn't understand life in New York City. Like the
Yeah.
first case, I remember going to court, not maybe one of the first cases, you were talking about budgets and it was like talking about like fresh flowers on the foyer table in the townhouse and like the budget for this and how much it costs. And
Oh,
I was like, aside from the fact that I love the voyeuristic part of it,
yes.
it was just so fascinating to learn about the lives of these people, who you kind of read about or see in the news or watch on TV and get familiar with them.
So you really got to see like the true behind the scenes of like why these people are getting divorced, kind of why they're fighting, where it is. Do you think that a lot of it is probably related to things outside of like the like just trickle down of why they're actually getting divorced versus why they think they're getting divorced, like as you start to uncover it? Or is it usually like pretty cut blank? Like,
I think so. Listen, I think, I always tell people when people get married young, right? And now people are getting married older, but
mhm,
20 years ago when I started doing
mhm.
this, the idea was that like if you weren't married by 30 and you were like a woman, like, oh my God,
Yeah, totally.
so I think people get married so young, and then 20 years later, they aren't necessarily who they thought they were going to be, or there were challenges. I think a lot of it is, that, or maybe there are change in financial circumstances that are very difficult.
Mhm.
2008, 2009 was like a really tough time with the market. 9/11 was a tough
Yeah.
time. I think that you just don't necessarily know who you're going to be when you get married, especially so young. And I think that at the beginning, that was a lot of it. I think also it's much easier to get divorced if you have a lot of money. So, right, people
Yes.
have to stay married sometimes because they can't afford two homes, or, it's just an impossible financial situation.
I was just talking to someone about this last night in terms of especially like in a city like New York, how easy it is to just kind of grit your teeth and bear it because you're like, wait, I have to get another apartment. I have to get another nanny. Where am I going to be? Like, what does it look like? Blah, 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 blah. It's hard.
It's hard. It's actually even harder, I think, in the suburbs where you have this house in a suburb where, the kids live in a big home and your taxes are high, and the other parent can't necessarily just buy a home right near the home,
Totally.
right? Like they're going to like White Plains and getting an apartment, where in New York City, the benefit is like you can still find a place, even if you live in the fanciest building. If you have to like downgrade, you can find something
Yeah,
somewhat near your neighborhood.
true.
So those things are a little bit easier. But I do think, financially, it gives people the independence of, being able to get divorced. Maybe there are going to be some changes in your life, but you do have that freedom in a way other people don't.
What are some of the things that you see like consistently that are like the one of the biggest issues when it comes to actually trying to divide assets? Like, like what are you like, oh, this again?
Um, Well, I think, one issue that's coming up now that I have in a few prenups that I'm doing is how to deal with a business if the business is the biggest asset, right?
Mhm.
Like if the person who owns the business has a high valuation but can't pay the person out upon a divorce, like what are we going to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, let's say the person who owns the business wants to wait for a liquidation event.
Mhm.
But the other person, if they don't
Wants
really
out.
have much, yeah, wants out, how are we going to deal with it? So that's certainly a complicated issue that I'm dealing with right now. That there's not really, always a black and white answer.
Yeah.
In dealing with it in a divorce, like maybe the non-business owner owns, gets the apartment, or, but then if the money is really tied up in the business,
That person then has no
it
liquidity.
has no liquidity, and how are they going to pay support? And so, I think the business valuation and the, reality of dividing the value of the business is an issue that I'm dealing with a lot right now.
It's also so crazy because I think there's so many valuations out there
That's right.
too, which is like, you have one person who's like, oh, well, my partner's business is worth X. And the partner's like, yeah, I wish it was worth X, but it's not. And like, who's to decide what the valuation actually is?
Yes. So,
Because,
so we hire forensics
yeah,
to do that. But then, of course, right, people will be like, well, in this email, someone wrote that it's actually worth this. And you're like, it's the same thing with homes, right? Like there's the value of your apartment for like mortgage
yeah,
purposes, and then the value of your apartment if you actually are trying to sell it,
yeah.
right now. So, we do hire experts, but then oftentimes what happens is like, I hire an expert, then the other side hires an expert, then the experts are fighting.
And then you're like, wait, what?
I
Like,
know.
where do we go from
Where do
here?
we go from here? So, and then the court ultimately has to decide which expert to rely on, or, can you kind of attack the report? And then the problem is, right, these cases go on so long.
Mm.
Well, maybe something happens and the business is no longer worth that. And then where's the person going to get the liquidity? So
Yeah.
the delay causes a lot of problems, with that as well.
Are there things that like, so, back, like, let's get into the prenup
Hmm.
situation of it all, right? Are there things that couples should be doing or could be doing that are smarter when it comes to before they get married in terms of like, how would you advise a couple if you look reverse engineer it, right? Be like, these are the important things. Maybe you think this is important, but these are actually the things that are important to discuss.
So I think, first of all, having the conversation is the most important part, right?
Mhm.
Like, so, people say, oh, should everyone get prenups? What should you do? And I'm like, if you're having that conversation with your partner about how you see your financial lives kind of going in the future, that's number one most important, right? So, like, if you two decide you're all in, you don't like, you're young, you have nothing, and you're like, let's go for this ride, like, good for you. I'm not sitting here saying every single person who gets married from the beginning needs to like
Mhm.
have a signed document. That said, there are so many instances where you should. And even if you're just like, if you learn like this is the law now, the law could change, right? Look at our
Yes.
government. Like,
Yes.
who knows what's going to happen? And also, like, if you move over the border to Greenwich, Connecticut, because like you find a house there that you love once you have kids, like
Yeah.
the laws are totally different too.
So
So, like,
true.
do we want to, even if we just say, these are the laws right now in New York, we want to document that even if we get divorced in 20 years, because we know what the situation is now, we want to be the deciders of our fate in a divorce.
Mhm.
Let's just say, these are the rules. This is what happens. When we get divorced, then we know, right? Then there are no surprises.
Yep.
Right? Because like maintenance laws have changed and who knows what's going to happen with equitable distribution or, I mean, maintenance is a really big one, but like retirement funds, who knows what's going to happen. But at least you just say, we're deciding together what happens. And that could be just saying like, okay, we're everything we earn together is together and
Yeah.
right. So the issue is the other thing is a lot of people will think that their lives are going in one way, right? Like maybe everyone thinks that the husband who's in finance is going to be the big earner and they're going to write this prenup thinking about carried interest, thinking about, potential VC partnerships, whatever it is. But maybe wife, and I'm sorry, I'm talking in
Yes.
like,
Totally. I got it here too.
could be two women, could be
Yeah.
two men, whatever it is, she comes up with this brilliant idea walking down the street one day and her business booms, right? So, like, you don't really know what's going to happen. So,
Mhm.
I think if you think about, one, do we want to have a financial partnership? Are we saying that anything we do together is ours together? And let's just make sure that that's what's documented.
Yep.
Or are there things that we have now that we need to specifically talk about? But I think just, you can't guess what's going to happen in the
Yeah.
future. So I think listening to lawyers about these are the things that are addressed, how do we want to go into it is kind of the first step in just having that conversation. I mean, because you can't predict the future.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about is this whole like idea of one parent most likely is going to end up staying at home and taking care of kids and
Hmm.
or being the one that's more responsible for the children, and it's often sometimes not seen as like the monetary contribution to the family, where it's like, wait, raising the kids itself is one of the hardest jobs ever, and maybe like it's not, you don't see it from a monetary standpoint, but that is energy, effort, time, and it usually, like, quite often falls on the woman. I've seen a few of my male friends that now lean on to, and they're taking that on. But like 9 times out of 10, it usually does in a heterosexual relationship, falls on the woman. And it's like, how do you really sit down and talk about like, okay, what does this look like in the future in case one of us either A, might not work as much, B, doesn't work at all, or C, is working and also dealing with the child rearing? Like, how does this all play in? And I think there's something to be said about being more specific of like, life evolves, careers evolve and change, but how do you balance throughout your marriage what your roles are and your responsibilities?
It's really hard. So first of all, in a prenup, you can't even talk about like kids or custody or child support or anything like that. So there's the maintenance piece of it, which is spousal support, alimony,
Yep.
whatever. New York right now is very stingy on spousal support, very by law. Okay. So people always ask me, what are they going to get? It varies, but it's not great, right? New York has it's rehabilitative maintenance,
Yeah.
meaning what it takes to help get you back on your feet, not lifetime maintenance. Getting back on your feet in New York City, if you're not working and you're a mom and you're 45, 50 years old, is never going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but like, listen, I'm a partner at a law firm and I'm the primary parent to my kid,
Yep.
like not giving up your job, not giving up your place in your field is so important. And
Yeah.
like, I know things change and things change often. Like, sometimes you don't have a choice. You're having three kids, your spouse travels a lot, someone has to be home. But I think it's a really hard question. And I think, you know, I always put in my prenups that, if there, well, not always, but I try to push, right?
Yes.
Like if there's going to be, if someone says, I want a spousal support waiver, well, certainly you have to change things if there are kids and someone steps out,
Yeah.
right? Also, I had a case the other day where someone said, we want retirement funds to be separate. And I was like, no, if there's a kid, and you are not working, however, I forget how we said it, full time, those retirement funds become marital because you need to be entitled to those
Mhm.
assets like that nest egg as if it's your own if you're no longer establishing yours. So I think setting in a prenup, if you want to have a what's mine is mine, yours is yours prenup,
Yeah.
which a lot of people do, right? They're like, this is not going to be a financial relationship. I think reconsidering that when there are kids, and it could be whether the person stops working or not, right? Because as you said, like, you know, even if you're working full time, like maybe you can't take a job that allows you to travel. Maybe
Because
you
you have to pick
can't.
the kids up at a certain
Yeah,
time, or you
that's
have to,
right.
yeah.
So even just
Totally.
working isn't enough, but certainly having tiers in the prenup, is something that you could put in there. I haven't really been putting in things that change in terms of, getting I guess an uneven distribution
Mhm.
of the assets if there are kids. But certainly if your prenup says one thing and you realize first of all, you should go and look back at it
Yeah.
if you have kids. And if you need a post-nup, you need to say, like, we need to make changes to this
Adjustments.
because it's no longer workable. Like when we were 25 and we were both in finance, I was like, sure, I don't
Mhm.
care. But now
Totally.
our lives are changing. A lot of times that happens if someone has to relocate. The other person can't get the job that they have.
Yeah.
And I think looking at your prenup and talking about it, seeing if it needs to evolve throughout your marriage is certainly something that you should do. Don't put it in a drawer and pretend it doesn't exist.
Totally agree with you. I hate that there's a lot of people out there that are saying that, because it's like, no, this is just the first financial conversation it involves.
Hmm.
Who you were financially and emotionally when you get married is very different than who you are financially and emotionally throughout your life, even without getting married,
Right,
right? It's
right.
like
No, of course, of course.
crazy. Okay, so one thing I'm so curious about that you mentioned earlier, because you have a passion for art. How have you ever dealt with a couple in terms of like in a prenup or during a divorce? Like, how do you divide art? Like, what's the best advice in dividing art? Because you can't split a painting down the middle. Like,
So, I mean, listen, I think there's something, it depends if you have separate property assets, right?
yeah,
So, if you're going to buy it with separate property, keeping records that you buy it with separate property so it is yours is
yes,
certainly important. I also tell people when you're doing a prenup, you have an asset and liability sheet that always goes, right?
yeah,
So, in order to ensure that the prenup is going to be enforceable, both lawyers should have counsel and you both have to have full financial disclosure.
yes,
So, people send me their disclosure list and it's like bank accounts and brokerage accounts and whatever. And I was like, listen, even if you have a painting or piano or a watch or a guitar
yep.
that's important to you,
Put it in.
whether it's because you inherited it from someone or because you think the value is going to go up, right? Let's say you buy, a $1,000 painting from the
Yeah,
Affordable Art Fair, but you think that artist is going to go up in value, list it because the only proof that you have
is that
that it's
list.
separate property is that list. So, right, because you're not insuring it if it's not really worth anything, but who knows if it's going to be worth something down the road. So, like, I don't care if you feel like an idiot listing, paintings that you don't think are worth anything, but
I'm laughing right now. This just struck me, which is funny. I can't believe it's taking me this long to like have this moment of deja vu of my parents. I'm laughing also because we were talking about the Hamptons
mhm,
earlier. I have such a vivid memory of me being like 10 or 11, and we went to visit family friends in the Hamptons, and we walk into their house, and I'm like, why do I recognize that
oh my
painting?
God.
And it took, and I was like, huh. We were there for like a week or two. And a few years later, my dad, in one of his like, took everything. She took the painting. She took that. And I was like, I texted my mom. I was like, to this family, I was like, did they? do they have the painting from our living room in New York? And she was like, maybe.
Uh,
I was like, what? And to that point, like, she ended up with artwork that, you know, had been generation to generation. And all of a sudden it's a different asset because there was no prenup. It's so, but I'm laughing about this because this just dawned on me.
right. Like
I haven't
just,
thought about this in years.
kind of keep a list,
Yeah.
keep your own lists, if you buy something, a lot of times gifts from one party to another, right? You'll list as separate property. Like, I'm sorry, but like take a picture of the card that says like, I love you, happy anniversary next to the bracelet, next to the thing, and be like, okay, that's my separate property. Because otherwise, like, you're not keeping those cards. You're not, how are you going to prove
Totally.
it's going to be on a joint insurance list, right? Like, if you want to be able to protect yourself, like if you marry someone, if there's a very unequal, let's
Yeah.
say, division of wealth, and you feel like you're not getting a lot in the prenup and you're never going to earn a ton of money because you're not like a professional something or
Yep.
other, like whatever. Like if you're a teacher, you're not earning a lot of money. It's
Yes,
like,
totally.
like, so keep records of like what's yours, what's like what, because a watch, a ring, a bracelet, a piece of art, a car, like all of those things have value. And even if you're ultimately going to sell them, at least you can prove that they're yours pursuant to the terms of the prenup. Like so many times people will be like, oh, that vintage car was a gift. And they're like, no, it wasn't. What are you talking about? You can't prove that it was a gift. But,
So, do you have any suggestions for people while they're married, right? Of like, if, say, my husband gives me a really nice ring and I'm like, okay, this was a gift or like a
yeah,
watch
but
or something,
I
like,
hate like
it
thanks
doesn't really matter.
or take a picture and like send it like, I love what you got me for my birthday. Thank you so much. Okay. Save, like
Just like little things like that, because you just never know.
that's exactly right.
Lord.
I
Lord.
know. I listen, I hate that,
But it's true,
right. I
right?
don't want to tell people to like live according to their prenup, but if you feel like you're in a difficult financial situation, you have to do those things to protect yourself. If
Yeah.
you're just saying like, we're having, like we're going to basically mirror the law of New York State and okay, fine. And,
But
but
write it.
you have different people are in different situations.
Because I also feel like so many of my friend group also are getting married in New York and then moving to like Florida.
Right. There you go. And like the laws are different. The laws are different in California. The laws are different in Connecticut. So know what you're signing up for.
Yeah. What else? Like, how do you? So a couple comes in, or one individual comes in, is
One.
like, "Hi,
Mhm.
I need to get a prenup, XYZ." What are like the first things that you ask them to kind of think about, do, go back to their partner? Or like, how do you navigate it with them?
So I always want to know, first of all, like, is this that you want to protect inheritance or is this something else, right? And
Yeah.
the something else can be, do you want to have like, kind of independent financial lives? That's one issue. The second issue is, do you have a kid from a prior marriage? Is that the issue? So what is it that is bringing you to my office?
Yeah.
That's kind of my first question, right? Because if the issue is just like protecting family money,
Yeah.
it's very easy, except for when, let's say, someone's family has like $100 million. And then they're like, oh, we don't have to work, right? So we're going to live off that family money forever.
Yes.
Our apartment's going to be with the family money. So then maybe, right, if someone comes to me and let's say I'm the bride, right?
Yeah.
And groom says, basically, let's go live in Hawaii and surf. We're going to buy a $10 million house in Maui, and this is going to be our life. And give up your law practice because this is going to be amazing. Well, in order to do that, you need to be protected financially because you're giving up your ability to earn money in order to live this life that you're not going to continue to have under the law. Well, if it was New York, if you get divorced.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's not so, black and white. But that's so I think understanding what the goals are is number one. And then I usually explain to people, like I'll give them a prenup kind of summary in 30 minutes, right? Like the call. So I always talk about the 4 buckets that are addressed in a prenup.
Okay.
So there's the first thing is, what are we defining as separate property? And I explain to them what's separate property under New York law. And I ask them if they want anything else in that separate property bucket, right? Which kind of merges into the second bucket, which is marital property, right? In New York, everything you earn from active efforts is marital. Is that your goal? If the answer to that is no, That's kind of a more complicated prenup because you're asking your future spouse to give up something, which means you probably have to give them something in exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that conversation is, right? It's much easier to say to your fiance, I just need you to agree that this is separate property when the law says it's separate property
Yeah.
anyway. Great. So what's marital property? And, are you looking to change the definition of marital property? So that's the second part. The third part is spousal support. Right. So is there going to be a joint waiver? Is there going to be a waiver until kids? Are we setting numbers? If you're young, it's very hard to set numbers now
Yeah.
because, like, who knows what's going to be right? But a lot of times we set duration. Like right now in New York, there are durational guidelines for spousal support.
Okay.
So even if you're married for like 30 years, you're getting maintenance for like 15, like half the length of the marriage.
Okay.
So a lot of times people are not setting numbers, but they're saying, but we're sticking to the durational guidelines. So we're married 0 to 10 years. It's for a quarter of the length of marriage,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yep.
So that's the third bucket. And then the fourth bucket, a lot of people don't really think about before they come into my office, which is what happens if your spouse dies and you're still married.
Oh, yeah. Let's
Right.
get into that because I don't think we've talked about this at all on a pod.
So in New York, you're entitled to 1/3 of your spouse's estate if they die while you're still married.
No
Right?
matter what.
No, that's called a right of election.
Yes.
So let's say I die and my will says I'm giving you 100%. My husband can say, raising my right of election, and I want my third.
No
And
matter what the will says.
no matter what the will says, he can take the third from you and say, nope, you're not getting it.
Okay.
So in a prenup, you can waive your right of election or you can do some combination. So a lot of people who have significant family wealth want the spouse to waive the right of election because maybe the family's like, if you don't have kids, it has to go to your sibling,
Mhm.
right? So I need you to waive it. But then that spouse is like, well, what am I getting out of it?
Totally.
Right?
Especially if they're like living in a home together and
Yeah.
it's gone and it's like, wait, what? How do I maintain this?
Right. So a lot of times you can say, but the spouse gets the home without having to pay the estate back, the separate property credits. There's that part. A lot of times it will require life insurance so that, even if they're not getting the estate, well, maybe they're getting $5 or $10 million in life insurance to make sure that they're protected. So you have to address, well, I think you have to address, like,
Totally.
even if it's just saying you're not waiving your right of election, that is standard in my prenups to say, let's talk about what happens when you die if you're married. And it's funny because a lot of people say, well, what happens if you die if you're happily married? But like, I don't know if it's happily. Like, who knows what's happening? So what happens if you die when you're still married? And a lot of times it changes if there are kids, obviously.
Yep.
And a lot of times there are already family trusts set up for, kind of the wealthy spouse, if they happen to have family money, where the money will wind up going to the kids, which always complicates things too. But I think that that's a section in the prenup that, is an important conversation that
Yep.
people don't even think about.
Yeah,
And then
we haven't talked about it at all, which is now I'm like, wait, yes, duh. This is like all part of it.
So, and then, we have a waiver of the right of election once a termination event happens, right? So once you send the letter or whatever is required, you commence an action saying you're getting divorced, then we say the waiver goes into place no matter what, right? So, because then people can change their wills and say it's essentially as if we're divorced, you're not getting anything, which is a helpful thing to put in because it wouldn't exist if you didn't have a prenup.
Yeah.
But that's, another
Because
conversation.
yeah, it's that point too, right? Like you and I could be going to get a divorce, but it takes us years to get divorced. And during that time, I'm like, I'm going to change my will because you, and if
Right.
there's a possibility that like that prenup, if we haven't discussed it.
That's right. So that's kind of the fourth piece. And that's like kind of my intro to prenups that I have when someone calls me. And I know it's like a lot, but I think it's like a really good way to just be like, these are the four things,
Yeah.
kind of narrow it down. Like, these are the four things we need to think about. And of course, it can get really complicated depending on what kind of business you have and what you do for a living and what money your family has and where you're living. And are you living in a house that's owned by a trust and therefore you can't stay there? And, it's not as simple, but that's the first kind of entry,
There are just so many nuances.
Mhm.
And I think this is like the biggest miss that a lot of people don't get when they reach out to me and are like, "Hey, can you refer me to a lawyer? I need a
Mhm.
really simple basic prenup." And it's like, it's never truly totally simple or basic. Like there are all these little pieces of the puzzle, right? And it is really helpful to have somebody navigate it with you.
Yeah, and I think, listen, being overwhelmed by it shouldn't be a reason not to do it. Like, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, never mind. This is not what I was looking for." But you're right. Like, there are pieces, and it's important to talk about it. And even if you say, "Listen, I don't want to address spousal support.
Yeah.
I just want to leave it," or "I don't want to address what happens if I die. I just want to leave it." Fine. So
Write it.
focus, or but just leave it. Like, just say we're not. Just don't have a section about neither party are waiving maintenance. Fine. Neither party are waiving the right of election. Fine. Focus on what you do, what you did call me about. Like maybe it's about different assets. Maybe you have a business and, the increase in the business could be considered marital if you work on it during the marriage and you want to just be like, this business and any increase in the value of the business is mine. I can't afford to, be forced to sell it because of you. Or like, I think I'm the one, like my idea is the value, not the effort that I put into
Or
it.
also investments. I just a really interesting company just sold to Plaid, and I have a friend who's an investor, and they got an email basically being like, you know, X, here's the 5 things we need from you because this company just got bought. And like the third or fourth question was, do you have a spouse? And if so, please put them in touch with us because we need them to sign
Yeah.
their, I forgot what the exact terminology is,
Um,
but basically to be like, you will never come after us for
that's
any part of
right.
this equity within this company now that it's part of a new company.
Yep.
And what was interesting, they emailed them back and was like, no, I do not have a spouse. And the lawyer just was like, just to confirm again, you do not have a spouse.
Right.
Because it can get crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of times partnerships, another thing to think about is if you start a business, do you want to have an agreement with your business partners that if anyone gets married, how they're going to address this?
Yeah.
Because I think, it's also an easy way out for the business owner to say to their potential spouse, we have a deal. Like
Yeah.
my partners are requiring me to enter into a prenup. I need you to sign this.
Yeah.
Like the same way people blame families. My family said, we're not getting a penny unless you sign a prenup. So, I think, I always say like, there's always going to be kind of a good cop, bad cop, or they can be. And I always say to my clients, like, whatever you want me to be, like, I'm happy to do it. I should be the bad cop. You should be the good cop. Maybe your family's the bad cop. Maybe your business partner's the bad cop. My job is also to preserve your relationship at a time where, like, you're about to get married. Like, you have the wrong professionals involved. Your family doesn't behave appropriately. Like, your relationship could get messed up. And
Totally.
I am not looking to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I assure you, like, there are some lawyers who might not care, right? I feel like maybe they just don't read the room or something. I like to think that people don't want to mess up, you know, e-
Yeah.
engaged couples' relationships. But like, it's also such a personal dynamic, and we need to be very careful about what role each person plays. There's you, there's your fiance, there's me, there's the other lawyer. Like, let's be very thoughtful about this.
How or do you ever turn away clients that are like too soon to getting married? You're just like, this is not.
Yes,
Yeah. What's like kind of the cutoff date for you usually?
probably less than a month.
Yeah.
Unless, I guess I just did one that was about like, yeah, I guess less than a month it would be.
It's not worth it.
And I think it also depends what it is, right? Like you're telling me that you want to redefine marital, income less than a month before the marriage. Like you're asking your fiance to say that like what you earned during the marriage is not hers. Like that's very different than being like, I want my inheritance to be mine. Like that, again, that's restating the law.
Mhm.
You're not asking someone to give things up. The more you ask someone to give things up, the more time you have to give them to hire a lawyer to
Yep.
see the facts. Like that's where you can get into trouble.
Yeah. Okay. This is, man, I joking was, I had some friends over the other night and they're like, yeah, when should we bring this up to our partner? How do we bring it up? And I'm like, the third date. Everyone was like, that's why you're still single. They're like, do not bring up prenups. But there's something to be said about like, if over 50% of couples are divorced in the US, like this should just be part of the journey.
I agree. And I think it should definitely be discussed before you get engaged.
Yeah.
I actually spoke on a podcast with some bankers and I was talking about how women especially, but men too, but the minute they get engaged, they're posting pictures on social media. And then if you think about it, you're putting yourself in a position where if you realize that this is not a good decision, you then have to tell all of these people who saw you on social media, say, I'm engaged, I'm no longer engaged. And I think you're putting yourself in a really bad negotiating space. So, in that podcast, I said, like, basically before you post, like, get your prenup done.
Yeah.
Like, know what you're agreeing to, because otherwise, like, what leverage do you have? You have nothing.
Yeah, you don't.
If you think that that's more important, and then that's just the ring. You post the bachelorette party, you post the dress
All the money
shopping,
that goes into it.
but also, like, then the embarrassment of saying never mind for a lot of those girls is worse than signing a prenup that gives them nothing. And I think that being very thoughtful about not announcing to the world that you're getting married until you know
That you're getting
that
married
you're getting married,
fairly, or whatever your definition of fair is.
that I think, I have one right now, and she's like already gone on her bachelorette party, and like there's no way she's backing out. And
Her partner probably knows that. So it's like,
I think that that's social media.
do you ever have people that get married publicly but not actually with, like, go down to City Hall?
Yes, but it used to be a very clear rule that that wasn't a marriage. I think, and sorry, don't quote me on this, but I think things are changing, and I think it's a little bit more dangerous to do that. In New York, other places there's common law marriage, and common law marriage can be seen as a real marriage, and then it's like no different.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do that.
So don't do that.
So don't do that. I had one client who thought he'd be divorced by the time his next wedding was planned,
No.
and he wasn't.
He had another wedding already planned.
Yeah, so they couldn't get legally married.
I mean, sir.
These divorces take a really long time. A really long time. So,
Okay, on the divorce front, what do you have? Like, what's your, say I unfortunately I'm going to go get divorced. Like, are there any tips to make it shorter, or is it just like it is what it is?
well, I think the court systems are really overburdened, and I'm trying now to do more kind of out of court with retired judges. So we had a great run with wonderful judges who were
Yeah.
on the bench for a very long time, and they're not on the bench anymore, which is sad, but they're doing private mediation.
Oh, nice.
So I think if you have the money to hire like a private judge,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Custody is really what takes all the time and the money. Money's money. Like, you can figure it out. But custody cases, especially if you have a custody case in court, you have to have a forensic evaluation of the two parents and the kids, and they have to write this report, and that like takes a year. So, and then if one person doesn't like the forensic evaluation and they want to have a trial anyway, where they hire their own forensic evaluator to review the report of the first forensic evaluator, like, you're in it for years. So I think resolving custody, if you can, one, it's obviously what's best for everyone,
Yeah.
but that is really what takes the time.
Do you think that, like, just when people are in the thick of it, egos just get in the way of like clear-headedness? Like, how do you help navigate someone that's, multiple years down the road still fighting? And it's just like, at
really
what
hard.
point are you guys, the amount of money you guys have now spent trying to get divorced, trying to agree is probably what you guys could have just agreed on year one or two.
Yeah, I think people are so hurt and they can't see past it. And I try my hardest to really talk to my clients about how, like, if you know, just to kind of like, get them to just be like, this is what's going to happen. Let's move forward, but whatever. But a lot of times there's someone who was either totally blindsided or so embarrassed, or, unfortunately, someone has a problem that they're just not willing to address.
Yeah.
And in New York City, especially, like you can live your life like whether you're have a drug issue, whether you have a mental health issue, like you can live in the city and kind of get away with it and make it work. But when if you're getting divorced and someone's holding it against you, and whether it does matter or it doesn't matter, or people raise to a judge a concern, and then the judge is like, this isn't going to be on my watch. Well, now I need to fully investigate this issue. So, it's really hard, but I think, if you can realize that your kids are going to be so much better off the sooner.
It's over.
But sometimes you have no choice, right? Like if someone has a mental health issue or someone has an addiction issue and they're not willing to address it,
Yeah.
you have no choice but to go all the way through, unfortunately. But like I have a lot of very long drawn out custody cases that just are impossible to settle.
I have some friends that are going through it right now, and like one in particular, it just never ends. And I feel so bad, but there's no good solution because they're dealing with a wild, mentally unstable ex-partner.
Right.
And you're right. It's like, at what point, even with all they've brought in the child specialist, they brought in a mediator, a negotiator, etc. I guess the moral of the story is don't marry crazy.
You
never know, right?
But also when you're young, crazy's fun.
Crazy's endearing.
Crazy's
Condé Nast.
When you're 25 and you're traveling around the world and you're living your best life, but when you have like 3 kids and you're dealing with aging parents, right? Like, and you have real responsibilities and challenges, and maybe someone's all they cared about was their career, and then they get fired and that affects them. I mean, you just don't know life and what's going to happen. And, what you think's going to happen, the opposite could happen. Like
Have you ever had a couple come in or an individual be like, I'm getting divorced, and then realize that they actually don't want to get divorced after like...
Yeah, I have people who like still have retainer money with me who are like trying to make it work. But I think sometimes, listen, saying it out loud and seeing how it feels and starting the process teaches you something. And that's the same way I feel about prenups, right? Like have the conversation. You might ultimately decide you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But at least the words are coming out and this is how we feel and let's talk about it. Like, what does that actually look like for us, and does it make sense for our relationship?
It is. I fault myself for, in the past not having genuine financial conversations with people because it's a false expectation based on like, the realities around us. And there's something to be said about, I think, unfortunately, I'm watching a lot of friends now get into marriages where they're like, wait, I thought that this is how it was going to work. And it's like, did you talk about it? And they're like,
right.
Well, because they had family money, I thought this is how it was going to work. And it's like, no, 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 no.
Right. Right. And also like when you're 25 or 30 and you have enough money to like go on vacations and live how you want, like family life in New York City is expensive. Like it takes a whole other level of wealth to make that happen. And I think some people have the expectation that that's where they're headed, but don't realize that like it's not always so easy, right? And it's much easier to keep your career and keep everything going if you're in the city. If you can't afford it and you have to move out of the city, that's also where the conversation comes in. Is like, is one parent going to stay home? So, and it's impossible to know, right? Because you don't know how successful you or your partner is going to be and how long it's going to take. But having the conversation is really important.
Okay. Final words of wisdom for our listeners.
Final words of wisdom. That's a big one. I think it's just about having communication with your partner from the beginning. Like sometimes, right, you think ignorance is bliss, but on the other side, it's not. And I think also like keeping your career for as long as you can. I think it's so important to kind of stay in it, to stay active, to know that you have something for you to fall back on, to stay engaged with, because I do think a lot of problems in relationships come when one person like has this very busy, active career, then the other person takes care of the kids. I mean, I'm in it now where like my kid's 14. like, then it's all about finding yourself again. And I
Yeah.
have my career, but I do know people who don't have a career. Now what? So I think kind of always having the what for yourself. It might sound fun to like not have to go to work and it's kids are hard, but kind of always having your thing, I think is really important.
This was the best. Thank you. I'm
Thanks.
so happy we did
I know.
this.